Hi, everyone. So, this week we are going to be highlighting the philosopher David Hume. He was very influential on a lot of different areas of philosophy. So, I wanted to point out to you what his main contributions were and then how they can apply to your life. What can you do with David Hume's ideas? So, David Hume was born in Edinburgh, Scotland in 1711 and he died in 1776. So you can think about the history of that time period, the area, the culture, and what was going on during that time as you consider some of his ideas. So, in studying David Hume, we really can dive into several different areas of philosophy, and he wrote in what's called empiricism, which I'll explain a little bit more of that in a minute. He wrote in the area of skepticism, in ethics, he's a key figure, and in the philosophy of religion. So, some of the key areas that you can explore, let's start with empiricism. So, he's one of the central figures of empiricism. And this is the view that knowledge primarily comes from sensory experience. So, this is different from some of our ancient philosophers where they believed in rationalism and the idea that we find our knowledge within us. It comes within us, but not from experience. And later we'll talk a little bit more about Descartes, and you'll learn that he questioned our experiences and he thought that they were faulty because we couldn't rely on the five senses. So Descartes comes before Hume. Just to give you an idea of the time frame. So if we're thinking about how to apply empiricism to our own belief system and what you can use that for, is that you want to be able to question your own experience. You've all heard of this idea where an accident happens, there's maybe 10 people who witness the accident, and each of the people tell a completely different story. And so this sort of goes back to the idea of Descartes' thinking in stating that, well, what can we rely on? Can we actually rely on this to give us knowledge? So his work emphasizes that all human knowledge is ultimately grounded in experience. And so he challenges this idea of rationalism, or those innate ideas that Descartes and Plato and some of the ancient philosophers talk about. So the question to be asking yourself here is, what do you believe? Do you believe we can gain knowledge from our personal experience? And if so, what kind of knowledge? And we'll be talking about that more later in the class also. So Hume is also famous for this problem of induction. So he questioned the logical basis of inductive reasoning, or how we justify the leap from specific observations to general conclusions. And so this still remains a problem today, right? We make a specific observation about something, but then we come to a general conclusion about it without investigating it further. So really what Hume would like us to do is put on our critical thinking hats and question things more. Don't come to these general conclusions or logical fallacies. Instead, you want to be more, number 3, skeptical. So Hume was skeptical about many traditional metaphysical concepts, and metaphysics is that sense of or investigation of the nature of reality. So he was skeptical about causality, personal identity, and the existence of God. And he argued that our belief in causality, for example, is based in a habit rather than a natural or rational deduction. So that really leads us into ethics and Hume's sense of ethics. So Hume's moral philosophy is based on the idea that morality is rooted in human feelings rather than in objective facts or reasons. He argued that reason alone cannot motivate moral action. which he thought instead arose from what he calls sentiments or feelings. And so the reason that this is important when considering ethics is you might want to reflect on, if you've started already keeping a philosophy journal, you might want to reflect on your own sense of morals and how embedded that is in your feeling state. Are you looking at an event, a moral event, from kind of an objective point of view where you're like outside yourself looking in at what's happening? Or can you see the way that your feelings and emotions have gotten involved in the event? So these are just some questions to ask yourself. Hume also was very involved in critiquing some of the traditional arguments for the existence of God. And so he has these dialogues concerning natural religion. That's really his seminal work in the philosophy of religion. And he explores the limits of human reason in understanding the divine. So as you can see, through all of these things I've mentioned so far, he's really looking at the nature of human reason and how far that can get us. And he's emphasizing feelings and emotions more, ideas. And so his main critique in the philosophy of religion was on the design argument or the cosmological argument. So if you're interested in more about that, you can maybe watch some YouTube videos. But this is going to be important in your own life as you reflect on your own feelings about religion, how you see religion, and whether or not human reason really fits in to religion, whether or not we use logic for religious arguments, or whether or not we use those faith-based arguments, things that come from within us. And a lot of us sort of throw logic to the side when it comes to religion, and we base them on our own experiences, maybe with a personal God. So that's his sort of take on philosophy of religion. And you can think more about how that plays into your own sense of your beliefs about religion. Maybe you're not religious, maybe you are, maybe you consider yourself spiritual but not religious. There's all sorts of things going on here, and how that affects your ethics. So he's also known for human nature and psychology. So he was one of the first philosophers. Remember, this is the 1700s. So he was one of the first philosophers to apply a scientific approach to the study of human nature in his treatise of human nature. And he seeks to build a comprehensive theory of the mind, exploring how humans think, perceive, and make decisions. And you have to remember that psychology as a field really didn't come into existence until sort of the mid to late 1800s, with people that you've probably heard of, like Freud. He's like one of the most popular psychologists, and I think probably everyone is familiar at least a little bit with his work. But so philosophy, just something else to mention as an aside, philosophy really is the root of a variety of subjects. So we started with philosophy back in ancient times, but it wasn't separated out into different fields like we have today. So things that grew out of philosophy were things like linguistics, science, psychology. So all of these things had its roots in philosophy and then over the years branched out. That's important to keep in mind, just so that you kind of know where some of this stuff originates, and you can kind of go all the way back to the beginning to figure out the nature of thinking and how humans think. So he did have some influence on later thinkers, and I just wanted to mention this as kind of a key piece to wrap up here, because we're going to be talking about some of these major thinkers. He really had a profound impact on Immanuel Kant, who we'll be discussing more extensively later on in the class. And Kant is a deontologist, and that falls under our category of the principles approach. And so we're going to become very familiar with Kant this term. So it's good to know that Kant was influenced by Hume. And so Hume is credited for kind of awakening Kant from his dogmatic slumber, if you will. Hume's ideas influence modern philosophy, especially epistemology. Epistemology studies knowledge and truth in the field of philosophy. That's the branch of study of knowledge and truth. And he also influences a lot of the philosophy of science. So by studying Hume, really what you're doing is gaining a deeper understanding of the foundations of what we call modern philosophy. And these changes or challenges to traditional metaphysical ideas and religious beliefs. So we begin to question the nature of reality, how we know the truth, how we know anything at all. And you can see some of these ideas rooted also in our ancient philosophers, but Hume is really pushing this forward in a different way. And so the development of his theories about human understanding, morality, and the limits of reason can really help us to understand our own nature and how we think about the nature of reality, how we learn, where our knowledge comes from, where do we think truth comes from. Does it come from within? Does it come from experience? And then he really also stresses the limitations of reason. And so this is kind of a wrap up then on some of Hume's main ideas, how you can apply them to yourself moving forward, and just some things to reflect on in your journals. I mentioned a couple of different books Hume wrote, and I'll just mention them again here at the end. So if you wanted to look them up and read some of his original work, two of his most famous works are A Treatise of Human Nature and his dialogues concerning natural religion. So I hope you've enjoyed this session on Hume, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts as we move forward into the class. I will see you in the next video.